So I wanted to make the title of this video Decoding Yoga, because I feel like there's a lot of people today who are practicing things like yoga, mind, body, breath-based practices and techniques, things like breath work and the various modalities related to breath work. And I feel like the general understanding of yoga is starting to become a little bit watered down or a little bit lost in translation. And I'm coming today as a student of the path and someone who's been practicing for the past 11 years. So all I can share is my perspective and my experience. But I've been teaching for almost 10 years, and during that time of my own development and my own path as a student of yoga, and then learning as I'm teaching to others and sharing with others, discovering what it is that we're doing and discovering more about the practices and the teachings and the path itself. And that's where I'm coming from today, is just to share with you as a fellow brother, as a fellow student on this path, and with the hope that what I share might be useful, might be supportive, might be inspiring for someone out there. And specifically, I wanted to talk about pranayama and the concept of working with the breath, working with energy through the breath. I think a lot of people have some understanding that the breath is connected to the mind and connected to the emotions. And as the sun rises and you can see the lights come in, I'm finishing here with a morning ritual around the fire of honoring the coming of the light. And I think that'll be a good bridge and a good segue into the concept of talking about prana and talking about energy and talking about pranayama and working with the breath. And my hope and my intention for those of you watching this is that what is being shared through the traditional teachings, but also my own interpretation of them, is something that I think can take the practices that you might already be doing a little bit deeper. And my hope is that I can ground maybe some of the concepts and some of the ideas that seem to be widely circulating now. And I mean, we hear in a yoga class, right? Breathe in and take in the prana, but like, what do we really mean? You know, what does that really mean? And for those of you who are doing breathwork practices or body posture practices like asana, what is it that those practices are doing, and how do they affect us? How do they have the power to transform our lives? Because it's not just about stretching, right? Like, people who think yoga is about stretching and flexibility are, as you may know, completely missing the bigger point. And that's really the idea of these videos of decoding yoga, is that I think by looking at the tradition, by looking at the tradition and also providing a sort of modern view on it, I think we can create a better understanding together. So here in front of my dhuni, in front of the fire, as the sun is rising, I'm going to think out loud about some of these ideas and some of these topics with you. So I hope you enjoy, and thank you for being here. And yeah, why don't we just jump right in? For many, many, many thousands of years, in various cultures, there has been a understanding around the working with the breath and the importance of working with the breath for spiritual benefit. Nowadays, we have many different scientific experiments and various aspects of research being done around the benefits of breathing modalities on helping us manage stress, anxiety, depression, improve immune function, help us regulate the two aspects of our nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, And so there's all these different modern interpretations and modern understandings of the benefit of working with the breath. But I think that when we start to see how the breath and the life force, the prana, are connected, it can be helpful, at least it's been helpful for me, to use the map that was given by the yogis and the metaphysical and cosmological framework of the spiritual practices of yoga. Sorry if you're hearing the wind coming. And this map, this framework, helps to understand how does the light, how does divine consciousness, how does the spark of creation become. And that is of interest to the spiritual practitioner, because at least this is how I see it, right? It's like the consciousness that's behind me, that is animating what I do. The path of yoga is about reversing that manifestation. So following the steps from the outer back in. And in so doing, by internalizing one's awareness, we can then contemplate and become aware of the source of our being, the fountain of life that is at the very core of all of us. I think that's important for the sake of understanding if we're working with these practices as a way of transforming ourselves, as a way of healing ourselves, as a way of growing or evolving or creating change, then of course it's not just about getting more flexible hamstrings. It's not even necessarily about improving in meditation, because the idea, I think, that has been really helpful for me in terms of having a daily practice over the past 10 plus years. It's like when I show up to my mat, there's some aim, right? There's some objective, there's some reason that I'm practicing that I think is encompassing the smaller sub benefits. And what I mean by that is the virtues of the path of yoga and the virtues of all spiritual paths are very similar. You know, like if we look at all these different spiritual traditions and the teachings, the highest teachings are teachings of love, teachings of forgiveness, teachings of generosity and compassion. These virtues, these qualities that we can seek to embody in ourselves that are like the divine. They are similar towards the divine, or similar in regards to the divine. And I think that learning how to cultivate in myself, or learning how to cultivate in ourselves, qualities that are beneficial to the whole, beneficial to life, beneficial to my neighbor, to my mother, to my lover, to my friend, to my enemy, whatever relationship I have, I believe that through the right cultivation of the energy and the flow of the life force, I can improve all of my relations, and in so doing also improve how I feel in my body, which of course that's where all the additional benefits come from. So with prana, the concept of working with prana, working with life force, it's useful to see the map of that divine consciousness and how it becomes anything, because in the spiritual science of yoga, if we look at what is the metaphysical framework of yoga, well, it comes from a school of thought known as Samkhya. And Samkhya is like it's the metaphysics and the cosmology that is underneath yoga, it's underneath Ayurveda, it's underneath the Vedic wisdom, or it's connected to Vedic wisdom. And so this is an ancient system of thought, and the word Samkhya actually means to count, or enumeration. It's a way to categorize reality. And these teachings about reality in the divine consciousness and its manifestation into the human and our human experience, seeing the complexity, but also the how do we call it? Like, there's a simplicity in that. And I'm gonna do my best to share like briefly about this map, just so that there's a little bit of a context to Samkhya. And in the map, it's like, you know, we're talking about the one, the ultimate supreme consciousness, divine consciousness, becoming many. And so the first step of the one becoming many is it splits itself into two. And if we follow the map down, so that's at the very top of the descent of the infinite. And at the very bottom, when the infinite has become something of form and substance, we have the 5 elements, the Pancha Mahabhutas: earth, water, fire, air, space. And those 5 elements, each of them are connected to one of the 5 senses: the eyes, sight; the ears, sound, hearing; smell at the nose; taste at the mouth; and touch at the skin. So each of those 5 senses corresponds to one of the 5 elements. And as a little bit of a quantum science experiment, we can think about, or I would invite you to think about, like, how do we perceive anything, right? Like, how do the senses work? You know, it's like, how does information come in from my environment through my eyes, and I perceive colors and sunrises and all the beauty that is around me? Well, at least according to the science, it's like the senses are picking up raw data from the environment, and specifically different frequencies and vibrations of light, and through the whatever molecular, chemical, electric process is happening through that sense organ, it's drawing that raw data in. And then in the brain, in the mind, which in the map of Samkhya, we're talking about manas. Manas, man means mind. It's interpreting and synthesizing all that sense data that we receive, and it's categorizing it and then compartmentalizing it and synthesizing it together, all the information from the 5 senses, so that the mind has what we would say is an accurate depiction of what's happening in the external reality. But the idea of it being an accurate depiction of the external reality is a little bit, we don't actually have the capacity to perceive everything that's out there in terms of all of the data. We're just filtering it through the 5 senses, and then filtering it further in the mind in accordance to our previous experience, our memories, our biases, our likes, our preferences. All of that ends up being funneled up to the self-reference point, which is the ego, the locus of our self-identity. So all of this raw data filters through the mind and then is referenced to the identity, to the ego, at which point we then have a relationship between ourself, the inner being of what we consider I, and the outer form. But those are the steps as the infinite comes down, right? And so the ego is like part of that contraction or consolidation of the infinite to then become something. So the ego is really important. It's important that we have a self-referencing locus point of this is me and that is everything else. And that mechanism is part of the spiritual path as we learn to loosen a little bit our grip on what we erroneously assume is who we are. And so we learn how to become more fluid and adaptable between the self and our environment. And a big part of that has to do with how the prana, how the life force is circulating between ourselves and everything around us. So to decode that a little bit and to decode what are we doing in our asana or pranayama practice, well, we're dealing with that flow of what we call the prana, the life force. And the map was further evolved and developed from Samkhya through and the integration of it into the tantras. And so people today have a very tantra is misunderstood. What I want to share, because I don't want to get deep into this in this video, is about the highly sophisticated understanding of energy that the tantrikas provided. The tantrikas are the practitioners of tantra. They elaborated on the sciences of yoga and the science of samkhya through various scriptures that started to arrive somewhere around 1500 years ago. This was after the Yoga Sutras. And so the tantras were all these different scriptures that offered revelations by practitioners of yoga and their understanding of the different practices, the different rituals, but specifically what I think they provided that was really useful, extremely useful, was their interpretation and their study and their science of energy, and specifically the map of energy in the body, in our physical organism, from the physical down to the subtler layers of energy. And so this is where we see the nadi system emerge through tantric scripture. We see a more elaborate understanding of the pranas and the flow of the pranas, as seen through the nadi system, of course, but also other subcategories of prana. The chakras were expounded upon. And that system of energy, of understanding how is the life force flowing through us, was then further expanded on and very intentionally worked with in the science of Hatha Yoga, which was about 1,000 years ago. So I'm just giving you an overview of like the history and to contextualize this, but this gives an idea of how the maps, the spiritual science of yoga and tantra evolved and gradually emerged into what was largely a physical and energetic body-mind breath-based discipline designed to awaken the life force and bring us into a state of absolute realization of the divine consciousness. That is Hatha Yoga. That was the system, and the intention of Hatha Yoga was to give specific steps through the body, through the breath, through the movement and paying attention to the movement of energy to bring us to that ultimate state of yoga that was exposed in the Yoga Sutras somewhere around 2,000 years ago. You still with me so far? I hope I haven't lost you. My fire is coming to completion. The sun is in the air, and I think that I want to conclude by sharing just like my own personal understanding of this. Yeah, because when I sit to do pranayama, or I sit to do my yoga sadhana, when I'm starting to work with the circulation of energy and no longer paying attention to just the physical thing that's happening, that's when all of the attachments, all of the thoughts, all of the behavior patterns, all of the conditions in my mind, those things start to come to the surface, because I'm bringing more light into my system and I'm restraining it. That's one of the words for pranayama, is the restraint of the life force, because that prana, that life force, is what's giving energy to my senses and perceiving my environment. But if I start to cut those cords that is driving energy out of my center to basically project reality, if I start to cut those cords, that energy starts to come in, and then what happens? And then the question is, well, what happens if all of those cords are cut and all of that energy is now centralized and held in the container of my organism, right? And the physical postures, the asanas, are a key part of that container of the energy, and the bandhas and the mudras. Those three things, asana, bandha, mudra, help to prepare the system to hold the energy that is normally escaping outward. And now that more energy is held inside, everything that has caused me to move out of my center, all of my fears, all of my attachments, all that stuff has to be reckoned with. That's the purification process of the traditional path of yoga. The traditional methods are alchemical procedures that allow me to confront the parts of myself that are not yet integrated, that are not yet whole. They're still fragmented. They're still searching for something in the world. And as I understand that further, that integrating that realization into my sadhana helps me for each time that I show up to my mat to work on something about myself on a deeper and deeper level, and work on how is the energy circulating today, and am I able to give my system what it needs to bring me into balance, with life, to bring me into balance with myself, to bring me into balance in all my relationships. So yeah, that is a little bit about yoga. I hope you enjoy, and go seek balance, go seek health, go seek vitality, go seek happiness. And I hope that these practices, the practices that you're doing, can support you in that.